Hello, horrorphiles.
You're listening to Dissecting Horror,
Examining the anatomy of fear in film, television, and literature.
In this episode, we'll examine The Innkeepers, written and directed by Ty West.
This dissection will be spoiler-free.
During the final days at the Yankee Pedlar Inn, two employees determined to reveal the hotel's haunted past begin to experience disturbing events as old guests check in for a stay, according to the Internet Movie Database. Roger Ebert awarded this film 3 out of 4 stars, concluding, quote, "Ghost movies like this, depending on imagination and craft, are much more entertaining than movies that scare you by throwing a cat at the camera," unquote. The Innkeepers was written, directed, and edited by Ty West, known most recently for X and Pearl. The Innkeepers themselves, Claire and Luke, are played by Sara Paxton and Pat Healy. This also stars Kelly McGillis, best known as the love interest to Tom Cruise's Maverick in 1986's Top Gun. Here she plays a former actress turned psychic medium in town for a convention.
The Innkeepers is perhaps Ty West's largest underappreciated gem. A highly atmospheric and character-driven paranormal horror film with wonderfully multi-dimensional and realistic characters who make it a refreshing, compelling, and thrilling cinematic haunting experience. Whether I love every film or not, I can have an appreciation and camaraderie with horror filmmakers that love for the genre really shines through their blood-stained work. Ty West is one this is true of. His films largely feel like homages to time periods within horror and beyond that, cinema as a whole. He especially won me over with X and Pearl for very different reasons. But I think what struck me most and makes The Innkeepers get higher regard from me is while there are some likenesses to other paranormal films, it feels like his most unique film that isn't a love letter to any other film, subgenre, or time period, but lives and breathes in its own offbeat, chilling, and refreshing shell outside all of this.
While making The House of the Devil 2 years prior, Ty West and his crew stayed at Yankee Pedlar Inn, where some crew experienced strange occurrences. The staff believed the location to be haunted, which inspired West to write and direct The Innkeepers. Being shot in an actual old hotel lends an authenticity and feel to the setting, which adds to the production value in a way that can't be so captured on a set.
I didn't make the connection before, but fun enough, I realized I was in the same film as Pat Healy was, Freaks of Nature, just as a non-speaking vampiric high schooler, and he played a zombie priest. So I don't remember seeing him on set, but I'm like, oh, that was a fun little connector there.
Nice.
Even Leanne Rhys-Jones' character, while meant to be an asshole, I found interesting and a nice expert navigator, even if in a more new age spiritual term. She still showed interest enough to make conversation with Claire initially, even when finding out she was a fan. She both acknowledges her less than fuzzy personality and having some dignity and backbone and standing up for herself. She too operated in a great avenue of not really being bad or good and still enjoyable to follow. In the commentary track, I did find that was interesting that her character was essentially based on Dee Wallace and her involvement with spirituality, but just, I guess, being a less nice person.
Mm-hmm. Their interaction with Dee Wallace was on The House of the Devil, I believe.
Yeah.
Dee Wallace is one of those that every kid had a crush on watching E.T., or she was in Cujo, I believe, as well.
Yeah.
The ghost story centers around Madeline O'Malley, rumored to have hanged herself in the basement after her fiancé stood her up on her wedding day. Her body was then hidden in the basement by the original hotel owners. I like that this sounds consistent with such a local legend with little more understood. Yet, there really isn't much to that story. It's a bit generic, and for me, the weakest aspect of the film. It's just there to give the plot a reason to move along. Still, that's fine with me since the characters and setting are what really engage me. In fact, that vibe is what gives it such strong rewatchability based on me wanting to be in that space with those people experiencing a ghost story that's realistic enough and not too over the top.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Normally, I always want more of the source of the evil or the origins of where this darkness started. So if it's a ghost story, yeah, like I would love to dive further into the ghosts and spirits and their ins and outs. But I really, while I think it was like a very, I guess, formulaic or standard story that they didn't really go much into, like you don't really go a lot into the ghosts, but I kind of found myself being okay with that in a way, to your point that the characters and just atmosphere is so engaging and gripping. And it's kind of just works as this simple story of a few, characters who are a little lost or outsiders in their way and kind of have this ambition and determination or fancy with the what may lie on the other side, and then are kind of in over their heads once they actually face it. And then I guess a little bit of like a kick at ghost hunter type shows, how real are certain things and are things played up, and then once you are kind of start delving in that territory, what does it look like when you finally face what you're looking for?
This film is rated R, but feels quite PG-13. There is a gruesome dead body and a ghost, but little or nothing in the way of violence, and certainly nothing sexual. There is a healthy amount of swearing, but not in any kind of obnoxious, raunchy, or trashy way. Perhaps, though, the R rating does lend it a greater horror cred worthy of a horror fan's attention, time, and money.
This was a film I had heard of, but I don't know, it didn't seem that prevalent. Like, do you feel like it kind of went under the radar?
Yeah, and when I saw it, I was surprised. It was kind of like Trick or Treat, where I was like, wow, where did this come from? This is really good. How come I never heard of it? And having come out in 2011, it was before the streaming era, before digital filmmaking really took hold. So it was shot on film, which I loved. It looked really good on film. And I think that added to its production value. But it earned only $1.2 million at the box office worldwide against a $750,000 budget. So it sounds like it got a very limited release, though that was enough to cover its production costs and probably what little marketing they put into it as well.
In a previous episode on Stephen King's The Dead Zone, we talked about it working due to the main character being the epitome of well-intentioned.
I think the word is epitome. Epitome?
Those are both words.
I don't think so. I think it's...
Look it up. I'm pretty sure.
Epitome. I think it looks like epitome, but it's pronounced epitome.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'll be sure once I've looked it up.
Okay.
And made you look foolish, or saved you from looking foolish.
There you go.
Epitome. A person or thing that is typical of or possesses to a high degree the features of a whole class. Okay, so it's pronounced
epitome.
All right. Schooled.
Yay.
Well, that's good, because I'm pretty sure I've been saying it wrong for a long time.
Well, I thought the second month of the year was pronounced February, but it's February. Did you know that?
Do you really pronounce it like that, or is it just spelled like that? Because I don't feel like anyone really says it like that. Maybe like when the language was first created.
I think you're right, but it is still technically wrong. And I thought the word warmth had a P in it. I thought it was warmth until like 3 years ago or something like that. Why is the spell checker constantly correcting me on that word?
All right.
All right. Yeah.
Okay. In a previous episode on Stephen King's The Dead Zone, we talked about it working due to the main character being the epitome of well-intentioned, giving, and intelligent average Joe that anyone could relate to. That was true, and I had sympathy for him, but I think the Innkeepers are more my breed of normal human experience. Perhaps because most of the characters here are a bit of outcasts in one way or another. I found the characterizations to be very real, not really meant to be particularly strong or flawed, while you can see moments of both. They operated in wonderful shades of gray that left room for confusion and irony, connection and enlightenment, fear and delusion.
Despite the lack of heart-pounding suspense in every scene, I was very much immersed here. And despite being very sparse, it does have some of the most effective and fun jump scares I've ever experienced. But this is not high-stakes, action-packed horror. In fact, not a whole lot really happens for most of the film, much of it consisting of idle chatting. And without being a comedy, it is quirky, funny, and charming. One can tell the actors were allowed to improvise, giving a poppy freshness to the dialogue. Even on the commentary track, which is as entertaining to me as the movie, one feels the positive energy and chemistry the cast and director had.
While I appreciated the film had its own identity and a certain freshness to it, there are moments that bring you back to The Shining in particular. The setting and story itself, while not so different than many haunted location tales, offers a likeness with ghosts of the past hallowed into an inn, seemingly frozen in time and deeply touched by death, with bloodshed and madness slowly creeping into our characters, even to a lesser extent. The setting and the visual style, with many narrow, slow-moving hallway shots soaked in, brings open a familiar, ominous air.
On Rotten Tomatoes, this film scored an 80% critic score, but only a 42% audience score, which to me is surprisingly low. As I forge through life, I am continually surprised and dismayed that society does not always experience pleasure and pain the same way I do when it comes to film. In fact, my prediction for you, Zukowski, was a general appreciation for the effort, but not much resonance overall, and I think you received it much better than I anticipated.
Yeah, definitely. Even after watching it, just curious, reading some just general like kind of fan reviews and things like that. Those that didn't like it, it seemed like it was too much of a slow burn, not enough happening. And I can see that. Even I really enjoyed the Claire character, but I can also see how she might be annoying to some people. But I think there was just a very like kindred realism, and I don't know. I just really, the characters and the writing and everything they kind of created was really enjoyable. Like, I think even on the commentary track, they joke around of like, oh, right here, like we could have just like made this like a quirky romantic comedy. Like if the ending was just slightly different. And you know what? If it was, I probably would have enjoyed that film too. There was just something very refreshing and engaging about it. But I could see if those characters didn't connect with me, I could see being like, wow, I came here for a little more of a darker, thrilling horror film than this.
I'm not going to spoil anything, and I'm not fundamentally disagreeing with the ending, nor am I saying the ending was ineffective, but I do disagree with it on some level. I felt a bit, not disappointed, but wished it went a different direction that was as tonally consistent as everything else leading up to it. Yet it was bold and dark and in keeping with a horror film. It fit.
Yeah, there's aspects of the ending. I like definitely that bold and dark churn. I like that they went there. Is more like the very end, the last shot, which it wasn't a huge deal, but it came off as a little more generic, But again, wasn't a huge deal. I enjoyed so much about the film that I was able just to enjoy the overall tone and impact it had building up to that.
Okay, well, regarding that last shot, just before cutting to credits, the audience is presented with a subtle treat, one that I never would have noticed if not mentioned on the commentary track, where the director and 2 stars reference seeing something in the room. I studied that fucking shot dozens of times over years and could never see a goddamn thing. But I found on Wikipedia a reference to what is actually there. Armed with this, I was finally able to discern it. I won't give it away, but Kelsey, did you notice anything there?
I gave it a couple tries. I'm like, I don't see anything. So you were more diligent than I, but it's cool to know that there is a little something lurking there as a little Easter egg, I guess, so to speak. If you enjoyed this deep cut, you'll love the podcast in full.
If you would like to join our Society of Grotesquerie and Loathing, subscribe now and give this podcast a like.
And be sure to comment your wretched thoughts below.
Keep our podcast suffering on by finding it in your cold, black, withered hearts to support us on Patreon.
A link to our PayPal is also below for one-time donations of any amount.
It was nice knowing you.